Welcome to the Listening Practice Test 2025. This test has 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear a telephone conversation between a man and a sports center receptionist about booking a sports facility. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Hello, Metro Sports Center. How can I help you?
Hello? I'm calling to inquire about booking one of your indoor facilities for a regular weekly game for my team. We're looking for a good slot on Saturday evenings.
Certainly. We have several courts available. What sport are you looking to play?
We play a version of 5-a-side football, but we actually prefer to use the larger court for basketball. It gives us a bit more space.
I see. The basketball court is quite popular, but we might have a gap. Could I take your group's name, please?
Yes, we call ourselves the DYNAMO crew. That's DYNAMO.
Got that. And the contact person for the booking?
That would be me, Liam. Liam. And the surname is Parker. Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. And your best contact number?
My mobile is 07700. Let me check. Yes. 07700915238. That's the easiest way to reach me.
Excellent.
Now you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
Right, Mr. Parker. Regarding the time slot, you mentioned Saturday evening. What time were you hoping to start?
We'd like to start at 7 p.m. and play for an hour and a half. So, from 7 until 8:30 p.m.
Let me check. The court is free until 7:30, but from 7:30 to 9, it's currently booked by a badminton group. Would you be able to start your game half an hour later, from 7:30 p.m.?
7:30 to 9 p.m. is perfect. That's actually a better time for most of the team. That's great.
Fantastic. And for your first session, which date were you hoping for?
We'd like to start as soon as possible. The 13th of July.
The 13th of July. Yes, that date is available for 7:30. Now, regarding the cost, the full fee for the basketball court, including all lighting and equipment hire if you need it, is $45 per 90-minute session.
That sounds reasonable. And how do we usually pay?
We require a card payment at the time of booking, but for regular weekly bookings, most teams prefer to set up a monthly direct debit, which is what I recommend.
Oh, a direct debit is much easier. We'll definitely do that. Can you set up the form for me to sign later?
Yes, I can email you the details. One final question. Are you planning to use any of our other facilities? We have changing rooms and shower facilities, of course.
Yes, a few of the lads like to sit and talk for a while afterwards. Is there a common room we could use for half an hour or so, just to socialize before heading home?
We do have a common room, but it's often used by our senior groups. I can reserve the smaller unbooked lounge instead. It's perfect for up to 15 people.
That's ideal. Just a quick question, how many people are allowed on the court at any one time?
The court maximum is 12 players. That includes substitutes.
Okay, I'll make sure we stick to that. Thanks so much for your help.
You're welcome. I'll send you the direct debit form and booking confirmation immediately.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear a tour guide giving information about the Royal Botanical Gardens. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the world-renowned Royal Botanical Gardens. I'm delighted to be your guide today. Before we begin our walk, I want to give you a brief overview of the site and point out a few key features. The gardens have a truly fascinating past. While many people think of them as a peaceful area for relaxation, their original purpose was purely scientific. They were established in 1789, not by the Crown, as is often mistakenly thought, but by a philanthropic society committed to plant preservation. In fact, our most significant claim to fame isn't our beautiful design, but the fact that we house the National Seed Bank and actively work on conserving rare species. So, the garden's main historical importance is that they were site of a major scientific discovery, specifically where the principles of long-term seed storage were first developed and tested over decades. Now, a couple of practical points. We cover over 150 acres here, and our tour will last about 2 hours. We recommend you wear comfortable shoes, and since we are expecting scattered showers this afternoon, perhaps a small umbrella. But what you really must have today, given the heat we've been having, is a good supply of water bottles. Stay hydrated. We do have refill points dotted around the park. We've undergone several big changes recently. You can see the brand new glass house straight ahead. It's a remarkable piece of engineering. Most people assume the challenge of a glass house is controlling the temperature, but that's standard. What makes this one unique is the complex roof design, which uses recycled materials entirely. It's a completely sustainable structure designed to manage temperature, humidity, and airflow with virtually no carbon footprint. So, it features a completely sustainable design. For those of you with children, the main children's play area, known as the Secret Forest, has been fully upgraded this summer. It used to be mainly suited for younger children, but we've now introduced a brilliant new climbing wall and high rope challenges, making the equipment suitable for older children a real attraction. Finally, for navigating the gardens, we no longer print paper maps. Instead, we encourage you all to download the new RBG app, which is free. It does many things, but its most crucial feature is using satellite technology. Help visitors identify plant species in real time as you walk past them. We're getting brilliant feedback on that feature.
Now you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Right, let's look at the map for a moment, and I'll highlight the locations we'll be visiting. We're standing now at the main entrance, just to the right of the information center. If you look at the map, you can see the main path begins here and leads straight ahead. First, let's locate the butterfly enclosure. This is very popular. Follow the main path until you pass a small circular pond on your left. The enclosure is immediately past the pond in the large rectangular building on the map. Next, you might be looking for a souvenir, so let's find the main gift shop. If you continue along the path from the enclosure, it bends sharply to the right. Just before the path bends, you'll see a large administration building. The shop is actually attached to the side of that building nearest to the path. Our walk today will take us along the sculpture trail. To find the beginning of this trail, you continue past the gift shop and around the right-hand bend. The trail doesn't start until you cross the bridge over the small river. The entrance is immediately on the far side of the bridge. Our historical highlight is the 19 ancient willow tree. This magnificent specimen is located off a small side path to your left, just after you pass the children's play area. It's quite tucked away, down a short path that leads to a small clearing. Finally, we'll finish our tour in the serene Japanese garden. To get there, you'll need to bypass the small cafe area. The Japanese garden is situated in the far top corner of the park, next to the high fence.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3. Section 3. You will hear 3 students, Mark, Sarah, and Emily, discussing their group project on renewable energy sources. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Okay, so we need to finalize the focus for the presentation on renewable energy. We've got 5 sources to cover, and we only have 20 minutes.
Exactly. I think we should start with a source that has the most impact right now. Mark, you suggested wind power. Why do you think that's the best starting point?
Well, globally, wind is massive. But for our project, which is supposed to focus on local implementation in this region, wind energy is actually quite limited here. However, I've managed to find an excellent collection of data on wind farm efficiency over the last decade, and it's the most thorough information we have to open with. It gives us a strong analytical basis.
That makes sense. Start with the strongest data. Now, I've been looking at tidal power. I read that huge government report released last week. It was quite a challenge, to be honest. All that technical terminology made it hard to grasp the engineering specifics.
Was it helpful overall, though?
Yes, in parts. I thought the most valuable section was where it compared the initial setup cost of a tidal barrier with the long-term running costs of a nuclear plant. It presents a very clear numerical breakdown, so I found it useful for providing clear comparative statistics, even if the technical descriptions were a bit much.
Moving on to solar. I've got plenty of research, but I have a big worry. The technology, particularly solar fabric and next-generation cells, is changing almost monthly. If we present current figures, they'll be outdated by next semester.
So, the problem isn't the cost, or that it's unpredictable, but that the speed of innovation makes it a challenging topic to summarize and finalize for a report.
Precisely. I think we need to frame our solar section around the CFAS development rate, rather than static figures.
Good point. Now, what about geothermal energy? That's always the hardest one to explain visually.
I agree. We need something simple. I think we should skip the debate about geological risk that's too complex and focus on what happens underground. We must include a simple diagram, or an illustration showing the internal process of how the heat is extracted and converted. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of abstract concepts.
Perfect. Finally, what about the overall presentation flow? Should we just go source by source?
I think that would be dull. We have to show how one is better suited than another for specific needs. We should structure it around the challenges, like the problem of urban power supply, and then offer the relevant renewable solution.
I prefer that, but maybe we should focus on an overall assessment, comparing all 5 sources on 3 key criteria: cost, environmental impact, and suitability for different climates. I think a comparative and analytical structure would be much more academic.
I agree with Sarah. A straight problem solution is a bit too basic. Let's do comparative analysis.
Now you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. And answer questions 26 to 30.
Right. Let's quickly assign one major drawback or characteristic to each source, so we have a clear summary point for each slide. Let's start with wind power. We all know the biggest hurdle for new wind farms isn't technical. It's getting approval. People object to the look of them in the landscape. Highly visible, leading to public opposition.
Agreed. Next, solar power. The biggest downside, even with the new technologies, is reliability. Yes, batteries help, but fundamentally you're reliant on the sun. Relies too heavily on unpredictable weather conditions.
Absolutely. And for tidal power? The main problem is that it requires huge upfront capital and specific geographical features. You need estuaries and massive coastlines to build the necessary barrages, currently limited by geographical availability.
What about hydroelectric power? Like tidal, it's reliable, but you need mountains, rainfall, and suitable dam sites. That's also a geographical limit, but a huge one. Let me rephrase. For tidal, the cost is the main limiter. For hydroelectric, the primary issue is the environmental damage caused by flooding large areas, currently limited by geographical availability.
Wait, I think you're confusing the two. Tidal's massive cost is unique. Let's stick to what we decided earlier for TIDA. And for hydro, let's say that its main limitation is the huge geographical and environmental restructuring required.
Okay, let's use E for tidal. And for hydroelectric, let's agree that the primary limitation is that it requires significant geographical testing and investment in a different way, destroying habitats and creating vast reservoirs. That sounds more accurate.
I see what you mean. The level of restructuring is the issue, so C fits hydroelectric better. Now finally, geothermal energy. This one definitely relies on being near tectonic plates or volcanic activity. If you're not on a seismic fault line, it simply won't work. Currently limited by geographical availability.
Perfect. So, wind, solar, tidal, hydroelectric, and geothermal. We have 2, but I think that's fine, as the geographical constraints are different in each case.
Looks like a solid plan. Let's meet again next week.
That is the end of Section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Section 4. You will hear a lecturer giving a talk about the history and evolution of communication technology. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good morning, everyone. Today we continue our module on media and society by examining the forces that have historically driven the pace of human communication. We'll trace a line from the fastest pre-electrical delivery methods right up to today's instantaneous global networks. Let's begin in the 1860s with what many consider the height of rapid analog messaging, the Pony Express in the USA. While it only lasted for a short period, it was a remarkable feat of logistics. The system relied not just on exceptionally brave riders, but on a well-organized network of stations, or outposts, spaced about 10 to 15 miles apart, where riders could change horses in just 2 minutes. These horses were absolutely critical to the speed and success of the service. They were meticulously cared for, as the relay of fresh animals allowed a continuous, high-speed flow of information. The Pony Express cut the coast-to-coast delivery time for news and official documents from months to roughly 10 days. However, its reign was short-lived, as the arrival of the telegraph immediately made it obsolete. The telegraph, introduced in the mid-19th century, was a true revolution. It used simple electrical pulses, coded as Morse code, transmitted over a complex grid of wires. This was the first truly instantaneous form of communication over long distances, shattering the geographical barriers that had always limited information exchange. It's hard to overstate the impact of the telegraph. It not only transformed personal correspondence, but was also crucial for the early development of journalism, allowing newspapers to receive and print stories from across the continent almost as they happened, fundamentally changing how the world received its news. Moving into the late 19th century, we see the rise of the telephone. Unlike the telegraph, which was limited to coded text, the telephone introduced direct voice transmission. This added a personal, often emotional dimension to communication, replacing the formality of a written message. Early telephone service, however, was far from the simple dialing we use today. It relied heavily on manual switchboards and operators to connect calls, which was a cumbersome and human-intensive process until automated exchanges became common. The mid-20th century saw the arrival of television. This was a massive shift because it combined audio and visual media, a true revolution in information sharing. It dramatically transformed not just entertainment, but, more importantly, politics. Suddenly, leaders and events could be seen and heard by millions simultaneously, fundamentally changing public discourse and election campaigns. Initially, television ownership was limited to the wealthy, but it quickly became commonplace, following a general drop in the prices of the sets themselves, making it accessible to the average household. Finally, we come to the digital age. The widespread adoption of the internet and email in the late 20th century marked another turning point, allowing rapid asynchronous text communication globally. One of the most significant impacts here was on business. It changed the nature of commerce, enabling global, instant trading, and opening up entirely new markets. Today, with social media and smartphones, communication is constant and mobile. We've moved far beyond just text. Our messages now routinely include various media types, such as photos, videos, and live feeds. While this constant connectivity brings immense benefits, the latest challenge is less about speed and more about management specifically, managing the sheer volume of information that we all receive on a daily basis.
Script ends. Narrator, that is the end of section 4 and the end of the listening test. You now have 10 minutes to check your answers and transfer them to the answer sheet.